introducing Dan Schatzman, who is the CEO of SpaceFund, and he's going to actually talk about how that venture funding works. He has been a business operator his whole career, working across continents and many companies to build long-term profitability and create value. He's an advisor to New Space Nexus, a strong advocate for space and for our local New Mexico and regional ecosystem. So please welcome Dan Schatzman, CEO of SpaceFund.
Wow, what a crowd. So I've been coming to these meetings for about 5 years, and the level of sophistication of the presenters, the level of sophistication of New Space Nexus, the changes that you see in the quality of not just presentations, but the new technologies is amazing. So I can tell you that from my perspective, the entire industry has changed already. AFRL walks the talk. So 5 years ago, they talked about pushing out and working more with industry. And by God, they have done it. I've worked with AFRL over 10 years. And everything that you just saw in that last presentation, I have seen, and at such an accelerated pace. So I think that's what my presentation is. A lot of people have tried to talk about all these changes that have been happening. And they try to compare it to, okay, what happened when we first had flight, what happened when we first had the internet, et cetera. I'm gonna try to say that in 3 short videos. Hopefully all 3 videos are less than 30 seconds. But it'll kind of give you that feeling of what did happen and how fast it's happening. And then I'm gonna talk a little bit about, how venture capital is looking at the space industry, because that's changed dramatically. Then I'm gonna talk about exits, because we're seeing exits, which means things like AeroEnvironmental, which is the largest drone company probably in the world, buying Blue Halo, after Blue Halo has only been operating for less than 10 years, at a very significant exit. And I think that's happened, and I'm gonna end my whole presentation this way, but I think that that's happened just simply because you can't be an aerospace company and not be in space. The space industry is the growth industry. So aerospace is very exciting to say, but aerospace doesn't count unless you say space, and that's new space. So I think the changes are happening so fast, and I'm hoping that I can explain that in a way that gives the economic impact and how economics is very important to it, and how the private side is working.
Millions of Americans own a personal computer. If you're one of them, you can now glimpse the future with nothing more than a modem, a phone line, and a few dollars a month.
Oh, that's
that little
right.
mark with the A and then the ring around it.
At?
See, that's what I said. Katie said she thought it was about.
Yeah. Oh.
But I'd never heard
Or
it.
around
I'd never
or
heard it
about.
said. I'd always
That's
seen the
right.
mark, but never heard
Yeah.
it said. And then it sounded stupid when I said it. Violence at NBC.
Just what is this main artery of the information superhighway?
Every business, no matter how large and no matter how small, will be on the internet in the year 2000. It's the primary way that people will look up information. It will replace the yellow pages as we know it today.
I'm not going to go into all of that, but that was just in 1995. So what has happened with the internet, and how fast did that change everybody's life? And what was the kind of investment that took place to get us there? And what is a disruptive technology? And why do venture capitalists invest in disruptive technologies? If you look at the internet and the Magnificent Seven, you can see how fast from 1995 to now, the large amount of growth that's happened in the New York Stock Exchange and the NASDAQ, a lot of that came from internet-based companies. Now, we had Silicon Valley. We had venture capitalists in Silicon Valley. We had Stanford University in Silicon Valley. We had the combination of academics, new technologies, research and development. By the way, the internet came from one of the labs. So keep that in mind as we're moving this forward. All of that converged to create something that changed the entire world from an industry perspective and from an economic perspective, and pulled a lot of people, gave a lot of people the access to information, the access to develop and grow. Worldwide internet capability through fiber optics under the sea, $300 to $600 billion. Every time I research it, that number goes up. How much does it cost to maintain that? I let that video go to the end because I love that video. Okay, those satellites, as you guys all know here, are about a meter long. $10 billion. So we have $600 billion worth of capabilities displaced, disruptive technology, by $10 billion worth of satellite systems. And all the other ancillary opportunities, capabilities. I'm very old, so I can remember having a telephone in my house with copper wire and being impressed on how I could make a long distance call, which cost a lot of money. And then voice over internet protocol came along. I was in Venezuela when we were using voice over internet protocol. And the cost of making a call came down probably 90%, 95% to the United States. So everything changes so quickly. And the acceleration in that change is unbelievable. So I'm going to quickly go back to Bretton Woods because just out of respect to all the people in the military and all the work that they're doing, people forget that, when Bretton Woods was set up after World War II, it was an economic system, but in that economic system, the U.S. Navy protected the world from pirates, protected the world from countries stealing each other's goods. And the cheapest way to move goods today and then has been over water. And so in Bretton Woods, we did that, and we pulled about 4 billion people out of poverty worldwide. So whoever controlled the seas controlled the world. Now whoever controls space will control Earth. And so that's why everybody's working so hard at this. And this is a message that, I'm preaching to the choir here. And that's an easy thing to do when you want, to get rid of all the sinners. But the truth is, we're a very small group. And the world doesn't realize what we're doing. Just like in that first video, no one understood what the internet was and what was happening. And so that's how you have to kind of see this sea of change, which I'm going to talk to. So you guys know this all better than I do. I'm humbled to be speaking to so many astrophysicists, great engineers, people who are actually doing the work. I have a very small piece of this. I'm just trying to invest in your great ideas. But the cost of going to space has dropped so dramatically, so quickly, that we're now able to make these investments in space and get a return on that investment like we've never had before, whether it's we're trying to leverage technology for the warfighter or we're trying to leverage technology to win in competitive environment of companies competing with other companies and countries competing with other countries. And of course, you all know Moore's Law. And so what used to be the size of a bus, a satellite the size of a bus, now is about a meter long. This is the hardest part, I think, for people to understand. It's easy to see linear growth as a human being. We had the wagon train, and then all of a sudden, and we were able to go out and start conquering the West, and then after that, and people would come out and do that. And then there was the train. And the train really changed everything. It was the amount of supplies you could get to the West. And then all of a sudden we had airplanes, and we were able to move so quickly. And then we were able to go overseas, what used to take a month or even a year at one point, now could be done in a day. And all the rest of the technology changes you've seen. But the exponential change the exponential change, because I was raised by a man that was born in 1919, and he said, you know, one of the greatest things he ever did is fly his father to a baseball game, because he couldn't believe he was on a jet airplane. So the exponential change that we're seeing, it's so fast. The number of things that we're sending into space is so quick that means all the impact from those changes are what's hard to see. And it's accelerating. And it's not just on the military or DoD, DOE side, it's on the commercial side. And you're seeing that right now. So I'm an investor. Of course, you know, common sense approach of Charlie Munger is something that I've always loved, but this is a wave. This is a wave that's as big or bigger than the internet was in 1995. But it's not what you know. It's so important. It's what you know for certain that gets you into trouble. And I love Mark Twain, but again, it's a common sense approach. So, you know, we could be wrong. There could be something out there that, you know, makes it so that we don't get this change very quickly, or it doesn't happen the way we see. I personally am betting on, you know, this group of people right here and all the technology that you're developing, but we have to mitigate our risks. And economics is important, and so the value equation as you go forward. So, you know, if you think about interest rates, just 4 years ago, we had valuations and SPACs that were out of this world, and everybody was talking about, you know, their new space company is worth $1 billion, and you'd be lucky to get in at this price. And now all of a sudden, interest rates are up. We have the tariff situation. We have some other situations. And no one is sure economically what the next step is. So there's a lot of nervousness in the market. So we have two worlds here. We have the space world, which you guys are experts at mitigating risks. You're experts at making sure when you send something up to space that it's still going to operate. Somebody mentioned earlier, you can't send up somebody to do a service call. So nobody can go up in space right now, grab your satellite, turn a wrench on it, fix it, make sure it's working like they do your air conditioner on your roof, and then come back down. So what you do now really matters, and you mitigate the risk by studying it, being focused, good engineering, you know, obeying the laws of physics, and we get it done. We're trying to mitigate risks in venture capital as well. We make an investment, and it's a 10-year investment. So if a venture capitalist makes an investment in a company today, we're hoping within 10 years that company's worth 100x more. So how do we do that? It's tough to mitigate risk and have a realistic perspective. Like I said earlier, the geopolitical situation, the political situation in the United States, those things are a little scary. I haven't heard anybody, well, actually, I would like a comparison of how many times last year people talked about the Artemis project to this year. And then I'd like to see how many times people talked about the Golden Dome compared to the Artemis project last year. So what happened? Everything has changed in a year. Is it because we have better technology? Is it because we have a different situation? Because of the Ukraine war or other threats? Or is it because we have a new administration? Or is it all of those things combined? And so we have to have a realistic perspective, mitigate our risks, and understand that things change on a constant basis. So what is our small contribution? Our small contribution to the space industry is allocation of capital. We're capital allocators. We're hunting for those space unicorns. Just going to do a quick commercial here. SpaceFund is an investment firm that is investing in these different companies, and we have a pretty well qualified team. You know, Megan was one of the first people 6 years ago to start SpaceFund, so it was an allocation of capital into the space industry. Then we have a team that's very well set up. Sagi was a lawyer for Blue Origin. We've got some banking experience with Jaime and Banco Santander. Leo Rodriguez and I work together at Emerson Electric, so we have very clear processes on how we look at acquisition opportunities, how we develop companies, how we've run companies in the past. And Leo Womack was one of the first people to start up the Angel Network in Texas, which has been very successful. Process. So I talked about the wave, this long-term change within the world by a brand new industry that is actually an investable industry for the first time. But in that investable industry, you have to pick specific racehorses or specific companies that are going to grow at that rate of growth that you're looking for when you're a venture capitalist. So our job is to find these unicorns, companies that can grow 100x within 10 years. So how do you look at a company from its first beginning stage that's going to grow at that speed? Well, we come to conferences like this. We talk to the people at AFRL. New Space Nexus is incubating these small firms. Q-Station is very involved in bringing small firms in and letting them work in their workspace and have access to AFRL. So all of these things that AFRL is doing and walking the talk and trying to get into industry and trying to help, our different universities are real, and we're trying to stay involved and as close to you all as possible. I want to just note this because people get confused. There's a big difference between private equity investing and venture capital investing. A private equity investor is looking at your past cash flows, and he's doing an estimate on how much those cash flows will increase in the future, and he's giving you a valuation based on that. And he's doing what's called a leverage buyout. So he's going to invest in a company using debt and equity, probably 20% equity and 80% debt. And so he's going to own this company with a lot of leverage, which, by the way, when interest rates go up, that is not as simple an equation as it sounds like it is. And that's why I had that slide earlier. But he's looking for companies that already have a program of record. We're trying to figure out the two guys that are at the university that did their master's degree building a small lab and then did their doctorates trying to develop an algorithm or using AI to create a brand new breakthrough technology. How do we pick it while they're still just graduating from the university? How do we know which professor is coming up with some idea that sounds outlandish now, but could change the world? I heard of one yesterday from Bruce at Stanford University, sitting over here. A commodities exchange for space. What an incredible thought process that takes. And what happens if that commodities exchange is in Beijing instead of in San Francisco? What about the power of the US dollar? A lot of power of the US dollar comes from, trading oil back and forth. What if things are in space are not based on a dollar exchange? How does that change everything? So the economics, the technology, and the space industry, they're all interacting all the time while we have geopolitical situations, while we have conflicts or wars, and we all have to figure out how to invest during that period. So of course we have portfolio management. We're raising our third fund right now, which is $200 million, and we would only put 5 to 10% of our total fund in any one company because nobody can predict the future. No one can see the future. So we all have to, be humble in our approach to picking which area to focus on. I always throw this in there just because there's probably some cohorts or some startup companies in here. Most VCs prefer not to invest in safes, so just keep that in the back of your mind. So how do you find intrinsic value in a startup? How do you find a space unicorn? The laws of physics. So I go through a lot of presentations where people say to me, well, we're only bending 1 or 2 laws of physics. It's a little bit of a red flag. So it matters. Science matters. Engineering matters as well. And so, you're looking for a team that is sticking to good engineering standards. They're double checking, measure twice, cut once. You have to have a systematic approach, processes in place. AS 9100 matters. Those kinds of things are important when you're trying to build space aircraft or you're in the aerospace industry. And then business fundamentals. This is the hard part. So if you're talking to an astrophysicist who just came up with a way to connect 2 orbiting bodies at 26,000 miles per hour, the last 1,000 meters, using AI, and everything he's done obeys the laws of physics, has great engineering standards, and you say, well, it doesn't work that way with business fundamentals. I don't have a systematic law of business fundamentals which will give your valuation what you're expecting. That's kind of a hard conversation to have. So what do we look for? We look at the team. Are they coachable? So when you're talking to somebody, you can figure out if they're coachable because they'll push back in a certain way or they'll come back or they'll won't listen at all. And it's difficult. Are they credible? Do they have the experience? Have they done this before? Are they committed? So just so you know, 50% of co-founders leave in the first 3 to 4 years. That commitment of 12-hour days, I tried to make a joke to somebody earlier in the conference about how people have to work these 12 and 15-hour days, and it's also on weekends, and they're like, oh, I wouldn't want to do that. No, most people should not do startups. That's a good decision, because that's what it takes. Courageous, you know, when you're going through that valley of death, and how many valleys of death are there? There's the valley of death when you're doing prototype. There's the valley of death when you're trying to scale. Bruce and I were talking about it. He had 5 identified valleys of death. I read through them all. It's like, oh my God, is this ever going to get easier? I get calls at 2 in the morning all the time from people that are in a panic because they don't have enough cash flow to finish the month. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Well, I thought I did. Serial entrepreneurs, if they've been through it, they've done it before, that's a big positive for us, that they know what they're doing and they've been there and done that. And then meetings. So when we invest in a company, it's like a marriage. We're going to be together 10 years. You know, most marriages don't last 10 years. And so we're going to be together for at least 10 years as you go through all of these prototypes, developments, valleys of death, cash flow needs, reinvestment, et cetera, and then maybe an exit. We're all together. So we should have a little bit of a relationship that is positive, that we know we can work together. So I do spend the time first to personally have at least 6 meetings with each company before we invest, and I go to their location and I spend time looking at what they're doing. Disruptive technologies. So that's what that little movie in the beginning was about. You know, a disruptive technology is a technology that changes how you do business. It changes everything that has to do with what you're doing. So the internet was a disruptive technology. Now satellites that give you internet connectivity at 10 billion versus 300 to 600 billion, that's a disruptive technology. Your phone is a disruptive technology. You know, I can remember Hello Moto with Motorola, and now all of a sudden you have all these apps and you have the capabilities of a Cray computer from 20 years ago in your pocket. It's just incredible. So those are disruptive technologies. And so we're looking for that, and we're looking for somebody that's creating a solution in space. And you know, one of the ways we find these is that company that I talked about earlier with the 2 young people in the lab and then developing their own technology. That was developed in a university, and it was a person from Air Force Research Labs that told me, you need to talk to those guys. We invested, and we actually moved our process a lot faster. We invested very quickly because they had matching funds from a TACFI. And they've already gone on the International Space Station. They've proven their technology, and they've already done a second round at 8x. So 8 times the investment. And so that's in less than 3 years. So these things happen, and it happens very quickly. And then the value entry point. And this is where, you know, I feel like I'm the Grinch who stole your valuation. I really have a hard time going through these value proposition discussions with entrepreneurs because, you know, they've heard or they've seen these valuations over time, and they expect that very early in their process. But early in the process, that valuation is not going to be what it is on your second round, your third round. So seed round is very different than the exit round. And taking the chance and finding the right venture capitalist to work with the right entrepreneur is very important. And having those expectations that you're going to crawl, you're going to walk, and you're going to run, and then you're going to fly are very important. And each one of those steps are another opportunity for another investment. And quite frankly, my experience is engineers, astrophysicists are very honest, hardworking people who like things black and white. And they will figure out a way to cut corners and bootstrap and make their company. And then when they ask for money, they ask for half of what they need because they're good guys. And you got to really coach them through. You need twice that amount at half the valuation, and they don't want to hear it. But they're the ones that don't want to do that and take either those lower valuations or a little bit more money up front are the ones that are usually calling me at 3 in the morning and say, okay, it doesn't matter if you're right, we need the money now. And they're right, because we did make an investment and we need to make more investment because you want to get them through that valley of death. So a combination of everything. And it takes time, it takes effort. And so, you guys are the scientists. You're the brilliant people that are coming up with all this new technology. Government is working with the industries. AFRL has changed how they're operating, and they are really working with industries and trying to develop these companies through, so Casey and I argue all the time, are you an incubator or an accelerator? And I say, you're an incubator that gets people into an accelerated mode to be able to raise capital. They've raised over $50 million for companies in the last 3 years, and I think it's even more than that now. But you're taking these people through a process that is just incredibly fast, and people have to change, and it's an evolutionary process with revolutionary technologies in a ecosystem that is changing so fast that you don't even know where north is. It changes all the time. So we have special situations that we also invest in, so we're not only investing in seed capital opportunities. Starlink is a special situation. Ron Barron from Barron Capital said that Starlink probably go public in 2027, so that'll be an exit. So you could actually, and we are investors in SpaceX, you could actually own SpaceX, have something spun out, and have an exit and still own the shares that you originally do. Here's our portfolio. I think something that's very interesting about our portfolio today is the number of companies that will exit this year, next year, and the year after, so the next 3 years. And so exits are very important for investors because that's when you monetize your investment. So Voyager's already announced that they're going to go public, so that's very exciting for us. That's going to help Fund 1, Fund 2, and some of our SPVs. So we love seeing that. I can tell you that we're on the boards of a lot of these companies. We've already had a second company tell us that they're getting ready to go public. They think in the fourth quarter. And then there's exits where primes buy innovative startups. And all of those exits are great for us. And we are very happy to see any of them. There are some companies that just go on, they're making great money, and they just continue to be in the private sector, and that's how they want to operate from then on. All of these are viable. All of these are important. And I do see the government understanding this very well now and helping us to integrate with them, choose the right companies, and they're making sure that they pay their purchase orders on time. So if you get an SBIR or you have an actual purchase order, we actually calculate that in doing our valuations. And I see everybody working together to create an ecosystem that is very successful. We do our own primary research. I will say this, that space was not an investable asset 5 years ago. At least nobody thought it was. We thought it was, and so we started investing. But it's just recently that people are seeing this as an investable asset and seeing this as an opportunity from an investment perspective. And that's accelerating just as quickly as all the things you saw going into space earlier. So it is changing, and the wave is truly happening. We've got a 300% return on investment so far with Fund 1. I think it's even higher than that now. And it's probably at 1.27 now in Fund 2. And again, we're raising $200 million. We just sent out our contract with our anchor investor. So this fundraising, which is a little precarious even for us, just like it is for a lot of the entrepreneurs and startups. It's a little scary because you have to have so much faith in the future. You have to have faith in technology. You have to have faith in the wave. You have to have faith in your own business model. I'm happy to say that things are working in our favor right now. So I want to talk about New Mexico briefly. I don't know how many of you are actually from New Mexico that are here today, but I can remember sitting in a meeting with Casey on one of her advisory boards, and one of the heads of Air Force Research Lab says, Dan, everybody on Capitol Hill knows that New Mexico is the most important place for deep space discoveries in the world. So everybody on Capitol Hill in DC has got it. Nobody in New Mexico knows it. What is the Space Valley? I think the Space Valley is very real. I'm not going to say who came up with this concept. It's probably Casey. It may have been the governor of New Mexico. I don't know. May have been somebody else, but there's not such a problem with who came up with the name Space Valley. It's what does it mean? So let's go back to my first video and look at Silicon Valley and how fast Silicon Valley changed everything, changed the world. Is it possible that we really have a Space Valley now? Can we actually predict the future like that and say this same kind of growth is going to happen and create a change in the world, just like what we saw with the internet? So you go down to Boca Chica and you see Starships launches from there and how we can take so much more up into space now, and it's getting down to $200 a kilogram. You move up, and we just saw the fashion show launch of Blue Origin, which I thought was incredible because nobody had to do anything and they became astronauts. And so, and then you move up into New Mexico. And then you're into research and development. So I look at Texas as legacy space, NASA, all the things that they're doing, and launch. I look at New Mexico as research and development and spin-outs of startups. Sounds very similar to something that we just talked about. You have Spaceport America and White Sands Missile Range. White Sands Missile Range has these capabilities of testing all the different kinds of operations and things, and actually things land there from space all the time. You have Spaceport America. You know, at some point, the FAA is not going to regulate what's going to launch from spaceports. And at some point, we're going to have spaceports similar to what we have with airports. And so Spaceport America is about a $250 million investment from New Mexico. The state of New Mexico built that during the Richardson administration, and they've been continuing to invest. But Spaceport America is a game changer, and a lot of companies here that are here today are looking at setting up new types of operations at Spaceport America. Then you go on up to Air Force Research Labs, the Space Force Lab. And they have done so much to change the space industry and integrate with industry. You know, we just heard that last presentation, but I can tell you that they have truly done everything that they said that they were going to do since my first time being here. And so I think that that's going to continue, and that's creating an acceleration. And then you have Los Alamos Labs, you have Sandia Labs, and they do work with NASA, and they've been doing work in the space industry for 20 or 30 years, again, but nobody in New Mexico knows about it. And then you go on up to Colorado, which is so beautiful in Colorado. It's so much fun to go to the Space Symposium and see all the trade show and all the things that are happening there. But it's more of continuing operations than it is startups. So I just see New Mexico as this great opportunity for research and development. Research and development, startups create value, and that's an opportunity for investment. If I look at just some of the continuing investments and money spent in the region, I get to 40 billion, and that's before all the changes in space industry. And I see that really good jobs come from the space industry, high-paying jobs that are game-changing for the regions. So, what about ecosystems? We've seen how these economic clusters have changed opportunities for people in the region. You know, nobody even talked about Austin 20 years ago as a tech hub. Seattle, San Diego, Denver, Boulder. My only question to you is, why not New Mexico? Why not Albuquerque? And why not the people sitting in this room having those same opportunities? Because it is happening, and it's happening at an accelerated rate now. So I want to thank everybody. Again, I was very proud to be asked to speak today, and I look forward to meeting with all of you or any one of you. And if there's anything I can do to help a tech startup or a company that you're working with, please contact me, Dan@spacefund.com. Thank you.